And I don't think anybody really cared whether we went to school or not at that time.
Huh.
So they used a couple of situations that didn't seem real, alcohol and abuse to children. We loved our children, we still do. So they took us from a perfectly model community and put us here, where there's no opportunities for employment, no human traffic for economic development, and that's where we sit.
Now you're isolated a good half hour away from Portage.
Yeah, and then you know our roads.
Yeah, the roads are all gravel and bumpy.
Yes. So that's the travesty in our lives. Had they left us alone, we would have been in the city of Port La Prairie, functioning as human beings without the need for anybody to help us. We demonstrated, we did it, we lived it, but they didn't like us because of who we were.
Your history here is more recent than it is on the East Coast, like the conflicts. It's a younger history. And I'm really hoping to hear from some of the elders here, yourself and anyone older than you, about how things used to be in the old days, your way of being, your way of living.
You have to...
before that's lost. So
you have to talk to my older brothers, two of them,
okay.
And probably some of my cousins from TP Reserve. Those would be closer to the true picture.
Especially your way of governing, of handling problems, of how is the system of who's going to lead, who's going to do what, how are the women involved in that? Like, because we always hear, well, as a settler, I always heard that Native communities were matriarchal as opposed to patriarchal.
Yeah.
But yet you guys are like the protectors, the providers.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering the role of women in deciding who does what. You said that, like, we need to be the politicians, the governing. And do they pick the chiefs, or this is what I've heard?
I think part of the if I remember correctly, my mom, my aunties were in fact decision makers, and my dad did what he was told, although he was a politician.
Okay.
He would take those concerns to the appropriate places for them to look after and that kind of stuff. And we were, of course, providers. We were the hunters, we were the runners, the shooters, trackers, and that kind of stuff. So that was our role as the younger generation. Mother stayed home, did the dishes, the cooking, and sat down in the evening and had discussion with my dad. My dad, in fact, would go tomorrow and take care of business where it needed it to be. So mother played a huge role. Mothers played a huge role in the Dakota lives. This is on Dakota Plains, from what I can gather. And one of the biggest roles that he played was, in fact, being mothers to the whole community. If I left mother in the morning and ran across to here, I would be in the care of my auntie, who became my mother for the day, for the night, or however long. There was never any need for concern about alcohol or drugs. There was no such thing.
So real sense of community, belonging.
Yes.
Everyone's family to everyone.
Yes.
Supported.
Yes. And that disappeared as soon as they introduced welfare. The deterioration of our ability to work hard.
That was like in the late 50s,
Yeah.
from what I understand. Right?
Yes. They brought a load of commodities, if you want to call them that. Sugar, baking powder, flour, and gave us enough to last the winter, and we became very dependent on it. And today we have welfare day, and very little desire to work in some cases. Some of them do break the mold and go work and make good living out of the jobs that they land. I envy them because they're not stuck on reserve.
And in the western provinces, I'm told there's like a lot of discrimination against who gets hired, and a lot of Native people are finding it difficult to be hired. Young people who you know, I was also told that if you have a juvenile record, if you make a mistake, like a lot of young people do, and get into trouble,
Yeah.
when you're 18, they don't erase your record. Like,
No one goes with you.
do they?
Lives
Or?
with you. No, I think in the judicial system they might not have a record, but
Okay.
I think in some cases they do take into consideration your record, whether it's written or not, if they know you were impaired. And one especially, sat in an interview where two of my grandchildren were interested in becoming nurses. And one of them was going to be denied because she had an impaired driving.
Oh, wow.
And that was a teenager. A mistake made, but it would affect a career. And I thought that was crazy. If they did that to me, I wouldn't be here. Like, I got so many impaired driving that it wasn't funny. But again, to me, it was a learning process. And luckily, it was before the new laws came in. But no, those kinds of living under those kinds of oppressions, the quickest release towards comfort is, in fact, to get impaired and forget about it for a little while. I think that's the norm for young on reserve.
Well, also that alcohol was introduced by the colonizers as a means of using you or getting you to do what they liked, and
Exchange for goods.
it's continued through generations, like alcoholism, fetal alcoholism,
Yeah.
births, and it's just a vicious cycle that
Yes.
it's hard to break out of.
Yes, we're dealing with some families right now that are feeling the effects of alcohol versus childcare.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, we're dealing with cases where we're in court because of alcohol use. And I don't think we were ever meant as Dakota people to use alcohol.
I have a neighbor who actually she's a student of mine, a young doctor, and she graduated while she was taking piano lessons with me. She did her own studies and graduated. And she was telling me when she learned I was into being an advocate for this, an activist for this, that she said part of her study was learning about the fetal alcohol syndrome up north.
Yeah.
And that it was so prevalent that it was actually a whole section of her study.
Yes, it is. In our world, it doesn't have to be up north. It's just got to be on reserve or in the streets of Winnipeg. We live in a world that's so demanding and unfair to our people. Like I say, the comfort zone is probably living in a world of alcohol, simply because nobody cares. Had we been accepted into society as equals and given every opportunity to do the things we need to do, we would probably live comfortably, happily. But because of who we are and the way we've been, society has been taught as to what we are. We deal with racism on a regular basis, including trying to get employment. So the quickest release is, in fact, the hell with it. I'll get drunk.
What do you say to people who say, why don't you just get an education and go live off reserve and be one of us or one of the Canadians? What do you say to people who say that? Like, opportunity is there if you... But that would mean letting go of your sovereignty and your Dakota name.
I think to a certain degree that's the answer. I was talking about rising above it all. Landing a job and working at it, demonstrating that you're capable. It leads to bigger and better things. I envy my nieces and my grandchildren who left the reserve and who are employed. in places where it seems like dreams, because nobody ever heard of people working for CTV or Manitoba Hydro or places that are oriented towards non-Aboriginal, but some of my people are working in those places.
Including Parliament now.
Yes, and by all means, if you can do it, do it. And I went out, I worked here and there, but I was told that I should be drunk, and that's what I did while I was working. And I succeeded to a certain degree because I was who I was supposed to be. I hooked up with people who were the same category as me. I drank with them, I worked with them, and they accepted me. And that's where I stayed. And I had to find that particular society who I fit into being a drunk. And I did it. However, I didn't last too long because you can only drink so much and work so much. When you're younger, I used to wake up in the morning and go to work, however hungover I was. Mm-hmm. As I got older, it got harder, to the point where I quit those day jobs and I started working where I'm at today.
For your people.
Yes. Well, it was an easy job to begin with, and then you become concerned, and then it becomes a very, very tough job. And even today, I have a hard time convincing people that I'm working for my people. They think I'm doing it for myself, and I think that's one of the reasons why serious crimes intervened when we were trying to create economic development dollars.
I love what you said, that through all your years that you've told me before that you were ashamed, you actually were drinking, and it's not something you look back on with pride, but it's something that now you understand was part of a learning, like a living university, where you got to speak with the people under those circumstances so you can understand them, and you've lived it, and you can be an intervention for those people in the future.
Understanding. I had a vocabulary when I was an alcoholic. I learned the world of scamming, deceit, lying, a language of its own, and characteristics that I developed as an alcoholic. I can sit back and I can. The individual, yes, she was cold sober and got drunk last night and walk, and I'll take one look at him and I know, wow, how much did you drink last night? Like, that was me. And I can deal with sort of things like that. I can counsel somebody like that.
Yeah.
And I do that when they need my help. And I try to provide it. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clients right now. I deal with very quietly, and one of them has been sober, probably 15 years.
Wow.
A couple of them moved off reserve and are fending for themselves now, controlling alcohol per se. Mm-hmm. So I do deal with alcoholism to a certain degree. I'm not familiar that much with drugs, but I know when somebody's high, that kind of stuff. And then, you can't really tell me anything about alcoholism. I don't know. I sat in an AFM meeting to get my license back. And a very young lady sat across from me. And I said, what am I here for? She said, we're going to do a questionnaire, and we're going to determine how bad of an alcoholic you are. And I said, you know what? I'm the worst alcoholic you can get. And she said, what do you mean? I said, did you ever wake up in a back alley and not realize how you got there? I said, did you ever sit in a bar and drink so much that you black out and you don't know where you went to? I said, did you ever wake up in a back alley in Winnipeg looking for your paycheck, see if you had anything left, and you have absolutely nothing, that feeling? And she got mad at me. She said, I don't drink. And I said, how come you're trying to tell me what kind of a drunk I am? I know what I am. I just told you. She said, this session's over. So I cut probably a 45-minute interview into a single statement. I'm the worst alcoholic. I'm not afraid to admit it. I used to be.
Yeah.
When I admit things, I lost a beautiful family. I hurt my children. When I admitted that, I became a man, the person that I am today. And I think I came very close to God, closer to God, and I pray every day. And I live with afflictions, and I try to ignore it. But if somebody come and told me about a condition in the chest area, I can say, you better go have a check. It might be a heart attack.